welcome to another Modern Mind Ancient Book. We got Nick and Pete here again. Pete, welcome back. So today, boys, we're going to do a survey of the book of Hosea. This is an interesting one. Lots of these books, they have themes and super interesting points about them. And Hosea is all about breaking the covenant of marriage.
Fun.
And prophecy.
He said sarcastically.
Says the unmarried man.
Right.
So, the name Hosea comes from a root which means to deliver or save. It's similar to Yeshua, Joshua, or Yeshua, Jesus, or Jesus as we say, when really it's Joshua. He was a resident of the northern kingdom, so the 10 tribes to the north, Samaria. The ministry was primarily to the northern kingdom because he knew about them, right? So 5:1, 6, 8 through 10, 7, 5. He refers often to Judah in a more positive and beneficial relationship to the Lord. So the people in the north, if you've read the Bible, you know that they fell away more quickly.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that their kings were often worse than the southern 2 tribes.
Yes.
So he was a contemporary with Isaiah and Micah, which is interesting because they were ministering in the south. And it seems like from sort of the 9th, 8th, 7th century, there was like 300 years of just prophecy. Not continuously, right? There were certain chosen prophets, although in the king's court there were probably many, many prophets.
Right. But in a great concentration over that period.
Yeah.
Compared to outside of it. Yeah.
Well, we get a lot of God's word, i.e. recorded biblical stuff during that time.
Right.
Whereas, the other guys are like, yeah, you're going to win the battle.
Yeah.
And Hosea was like, not so much. So it turned out Hosea was right. So Be'eri or Beeri was Hosea's father, but we don't know anything about him. It was a common name. So he was well known enough to be identified to him, but we don't know who he was. The marital problems that Hosea experienced with Gomer brought grief and embarrassment to his family. But in spite of these things, he remained faithful to Gomer and obeyed the Lord when he was commanded to redeem and reconcile her. And what was Gomer's plight? What did she do to him? So she just was extremely unfaithful to him, even having children with another man. But probably multiple other men over long periods of time, which is kind of prophetic about the nation having turned away, but then God redeeming, even though they had not been faithful to the covenant, which in this is being displayed as a marriage. So that's interesting. It says a lot about what men go through and why they go through what they go through. God gave us the marriage covenant to teach us something. That's what it says. When you break it, it's not good. It results in pain. It results in harm. But at the same time, even though we would say put away our wives forever, that's not what God does. Not in this context. He says, well, that's okay, I'll redeem you. Yes, you hurt me, but I will redeem you. That's pretty noteworthy. The events surrounding the kings that are mentioned in Hosea 1:1 are contained also in 2 Chronicles chapter 26 through 32. Hosea began his prophetic ministry during a period of military and material prosperity. Unfortunately, the 10 northern tribes were steeped in idolatry and immorality. This was a period when Assyrian dominance had declined, and Jeroboam II and Uzziah were able to expand the borders of Israel and Judah. Hosea prophesied of the rise of Assyria to international power, which accelerated under the reign of Tiglath-Pileser III.
Good for you.
From 745 to 727. Now this is cool. I'm glad this is in here because this did not happen in a bubble.
Right.
So the nation of Assyria started from the city called Assur.
Right.
And it's a Mesopotamian river country, right? So the fall of Sumer, and then the fall of the Akkadians, and then the fall of what was then the early Babylonic, period, led to the rise of Assur, which eventually became an amazing power. The Assyrians had a 1,000-year reign.
And we don't think of them very often because it was so long ago. But I mean, that's an amazing, if you look at modern history, fairly modern history, most empires don't last that long.
No, they don't. And Assyria's 1,000-year reign was by violence, coercion, and basically they were the original gangsters, you know?
Intimidation.
Yeah, real bad intimidation. Like, not the kind like, hey, I'll hurt you, but I will really destroy everything unless you are willing to acquiesce and become a vassal state.
But was that unique in the sense that other people wouldn't have done that if they had been able to? Or is it just that Assyria was so powerful that they could throw their weight around?
Well, let's consider that. So the Bible gives us this sort of crescendoing.
Right.
What is that called? What's the right word?
Building up.
Yes, the building up of evil and brokenness and violence. Right. So if you take the earliest nations like the Ubaids or the Sumerians, they weren't violent, but they also had a 1,000-year reign. However, toward the end of their reign, they started building walls and they started engaging in war. The original leaders of Sumeria were high priests, prophets, and kings, and they didn't really go to war, and there was no money, and they just led the people. But with the rise of Elam and the rise of Amartu, the Amorites, came violence. And with them came the need for more violence. And then the Sumerians also became a warring state. Lived by the sword, you died by the sword. So that's what happened to Sumeria. Just absolutely wrecked by the Amorites and the Elamites. Now, Assyria had been a very large and capable regional power, but they had not focused on the Levant, where the Assyrians had become power in the vacuum of that fall. But basically, what it was a nation of people who figured out that extreme violence could rule the day.
Right.
And so they started by conquering, I believe, the city of Goth, if I remember right. And when they did, they absolutely wrecked it. Just destroyed it, murdered everything, burned everything. And then they went to the neighboring little city-states and they were like, so what do you want? You want to pay tribute or do you want to die? And they said, oh, we'll pay tribute. Yeah, we're good.
As you do.
Yeah. Because they got really good at siege works.
Right.
So before they conquered the northern 10 tribes, they had perfected the way of war by creating siege works that no other nation had ever seen, done, or experienced before. They would build up walls and they would bring up machines and they would basically create like ramps from these walls to their walls and then walk in. Where everybody else had ladders that they would throw stuff down at you, they would build walls up and shoot down at them and then lay ladders and walk in. So, and they would do it all under cover and nobody could stop them. But first they would starve you.
So they were evil, but they were the best at it.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is by today's standard, they were also very moral because their culture didn't have, your word meant something. Your word was bond. You had to pay your debts. You had to pay your bills. You couldn't steal. If you stole, you got your hand cut off. It was a very moral society. Yeah. It's actually really similar to what I guess Islam would be today.
Right.
Right.
There's a lot of layover. There's a lot of shared culture because that is the culture. It's the very place where these things existed.
And if for somebody who's listening, there's a discrepancy with the word moral, you could say at least that they had ethical code that they abided by. Whether or not we agree with what they were doing,
absolutely,
they stuck to it.
So, let's bring it to the modern mind. The American military goes out and does some pretty horrific things, and we love it in terms of what we would call patriotism, right? We stop the enemy. So those people saw it, they didn't see it any different. So to the Assyrians, the Elamites particularly were a very real problem because they were another very capable warlike culture, and they would absolutely stomp the life out of any Assyrian city-state. So it was very important for them to stop that from taking place. And so they went to war. Well, they went to war on the Western Front for a very, very long period of time. Now, Tiglath-Pileser was heading toward the Levant and toward the people. Now, the Hittites were the first to get it. The Hittites were also a very powerful warring state who were a problem for Israel in particular, but a very small nation, not anywhere near compared to Assyria. They also fell. Soon after, this is when this is taking place. So the height of Assyrian power was during this time. they owned from sea to sea, from mountain to sea. 1,000-year reign. So when you hear that in the Bible, this is kind of what it means. So when in the New Testament it talks about 1,000-year reign, it means like the righteous reign that conquers by peace. A return to all of the nations ruled by one, but this time not by violence. So it's just interesting.
Yeah.
That thought. So the Assyrians, they were coming, and Hosea prophesied it before it happened.
Right.
So the length of his ministry is questionable, but it probably began about 760 BC and extended until Hezekiah. So 716 to 686. He lived a long life. He died an old man. The mention of Hezekiah extends the date until 715. Shalman in 1014 refers to Shalmaneser's expedition into Galilee in 733 or 722. And then Hosea indicates that had already taken place. The threatened invasion which he refers to relates to the fall of Samaria in 722. So that's when the Assyrians came.
Right.
The statement of tribute in 810 refers to money paid by Pul to Menahem. The allusions to Egypt are best satisfied during Hosea's reign, so 732 to 722. Some have argued from 609 to 1211 that his ministry couldn't extend beyond the reign of Jotham, which was 739 to 736, since these passages suggest that Gilead was in possession of Israel. These words could have also been stated after Assyria conquered Gilead. Wood offers a viable explanation for Hosea's list of kings. Though being clearly a prophet to Israel, he dates himself more by the reign of the kings of Judah than by the kings of Israel, mentioning 4 of the former and only 1 of the latter. The probable reason is twofold. First, Hosea, along with other prophets, recognized the kings of Judah rather than the kings of Israel as the true, legitimate heirs of David, and therefore desired to date himself by their reigns. Second, the kings who followed Jeroboam II in Israel were short-lived. Many suffered assassination, so their numerous names would have been difficult. Also, the history represents them was not of such a nature that any prophet would like to have associated his name with it. So the bad kings of northern Israel had turned away from the covenant, and Hosea obviously was a covenant-minded person, an Israelite. So he saw the tabernacle as a place that was a better place. Was the temple? The temple was in place by now. Yeah, this is after Solomon. He saw the temple as a better place, as the place of the covenant, as the place where a true Israelite should practice. Right. And so he mentioned those kings.
I'm leaving in the The rest of it can go. The people need to hear that.
What's the argument of this, Nick?
The argument is that Yahweh will judge Israel because of her immorality and idolatry, and then reconcile and restore her to himself, as typified in the relationship of Hosea and Gomer.
What's the key verse, Pete?
Hosea 3:1. Then the Lord said to me, "Go again, love a woman who is loved by another man, friend, even an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the sons of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes."
What's that?
I don't know, that really sounds insulting though. Like, imagine shouting that to some guy and be like, "Yeah, I bet you love raisin cakes." You know?
It's a cult practice.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a cult practice. It's a Canaanite cult practice.
It was an offering to their gods.
Yeah. It's a
standard offering.
What it really is, this is a statement of sexual deviance. Anana, I believe it's Anan, is what the Canaanites called her. Right. She was the goddess of love and fertility and war.
Interesting combination.
Yep. Yeah. And so northern Israel had fallen not only for that cult, but the cult of Balaam and El. So you had these basically orgies that would take place. And it was about a sweet time, a loving time, warriors of great capability. I mean, men love that stuff, right? Yeah. It's what men love. And so, these cults, these things, they're not outside of the temptation, what is what is pleasing to a person.
No, it's not far from us. We would define it differently. I mean, raisin cakes don't mean much to the modern person, but stuff along those lines absolutely does. People still chase that. We see it in the news all the time. Look at all the powerful people, Epstein, Diddy, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly what they did.
Right.
It's not much different. And they're not the only ones doing it. You know, human trafficking is a very, very big problem. And all across the world, prostitution is a very big industry. And, you know, in some cases, the girls don't get paid. Somebody makes them. In this case, this would have been a ritual for the Hittite, it would have been the Hittites, actually, who led them astray. So this would have been a ritual way of living their life. This is also very Sumerian, very Asia Minor.
Right, this is all tied in. They
very
influence
Babylonian.
each other. Right,
Absolutely. It's all of these are shared worldviews, and so this cult was absolutely about that. Sweet things, you know, time with women, eating and drinking and being merry, just not according to the law.
Far from the Ecclesiastes version.
Yeah.
Enjoy, but within the law.
Within the confines of the law.
They missed that part. They just had the enjoy.
The thing is when, as a modern mind, if we were to take this from the most basic precept of, is it true? Well, from this nation, it's true, right? From this worldview, it's true. To the Hittites, their version of life was true too. Their god, I think it's Anan, which was the version of Anana, which was the sexual warlike being, beautiful woman, who would also called Ishtar, right? It's all the same names, all the same goddess. So they would believe that she would bless them with children, crops, fruits on their trees, rain, all this stuff. Well, that was from Balaam. No, that was from...
They're all intertwined.
It's all the same thing. So it's about that. So from them, that's also a true worldview. So how do you decide what's true? That's the question. The modern mind should struggle with this. It's something that, as somebody who loves history, and I also love the Bible, but I also love other ancient works of antiquity.
Right.
I have zero problems. I got a book about Canaan right here. What is it? The Divine Council of the Canaanite and Early Hebrew Literature, because I find it interesting. I want to know what the early Canaanites believed. I want to know why the Hittites believed and did what they did. And that's how I personally determine what's true. Because when I look at the annals of history and I look at what's current today, do I see a Hittite worldview as being pleasant and good? No, I see it brings diseases and problems. I see it causes divorce, brokenness, hatred, murder. You can't just go sleeping with people. It doesn't work.
Doesn't produce good results.
No,
so then I guess you could say it depends on what you mean by true.
That's right.
True in the sense that it was a sincerely held belief? Absolutely.
Yep.
True in the sense that it works the way that they thought it would? Debatable at best.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. I mean, even doing just a survey of these books, what we can determine is that there are shared things, right? There are shared realities. And so those shared realities, what they do is they give us the opportunity to compare and contrast, because now we have thousands of years of ideas and practice to look at in terms of evidence. Thank you for joining us for another Modern Mind Ancient Book. We hope that your time was well spent. It certainly was for us. Have a great one.